Okay, I wanted to start, and I do have some bribery. I see Martin Manton, his Mars bars, and I raise him with a mixture of Cadbury's, all sorts of things. So, okay, I know this may not work so much online, but feel free if you are online to put in the comments if you've got any comments about on whether these are things that you would do. Who would do a skydive? Actually, quite a few of them. You can't, but yeah. So, okay. Who would fall backwards? I did think about trying to arrange this, you know, where you kind of fall backwards with your eyes closed and a blindfold on, and your family or your closest friends, sometimes they do this at work, don't they? Your colleagues are going to collect you. And just to make it even more scary, sometimes they get you to stand on a table or a ladder and fall from a height into people's hands. Who would do that? Wow. Right. So far, I'm no onto both of these. Okay. Who would put your hand into a bag of snakes? Ah, see, I knew that was going to what my comeback was. Is I didn't say what type of snake. So some people would, eh? Plastic snakes you would. Yeah, that'd be me as well. So, non-venomous ones. Okay, I'm going to have to split this then. Who would put the hand into a bag of snakes if you knew they were venomous? One person's quickly had their hand pulled down. Okay, and who would put their hand into a bag of snakes if they were not venomous? Wow. Wow, that is amazing. Right, first of all, before we, this is for your participation. So I shall just rain chocolate on you. Hopefully please don't shout as though I've hurt you. And so I try and see if I can reach at the back. Woo! No, nearly got Marilyn. Woo! There you go. Participation, raining chocolate, and extra blessings for those in the front. So, did you not get one? Oh. Oh, that was for you. Oh, good catch, good catch. You did, didn't you? You would do everything. Oh, wow. Well, if you were like me, I wouldn't do any of those. For me, I wouldn't do that. The reason being is because it's of fear. It's not that I don't trust people. For me, it would be a spirit of fear would be in me, and I would not want to be able, I would just not be able to do that. I'd love to be able to do all of those things, but I just know that there would be an element of fear that would stop me from doing it. So I wonder if you trust the air we breathe. Anybody thought about whether your air is going to be clean today? Whether the air in the church is suitable, the right oxygen level for you? Anybody think or worry about that? No? Okay. Anybody worry about when you put the lights on and you flick the switch, did they all work? Anybody think, oh, please hope, please, will they work as you flick the electric switches? No, maybe in a couple of months when we haven't put 50p's in the meters, we might be doing that. But we haven't paid our bills, but not quite yet. Do you trust going on in a car? No? You don't like cars? Because of other drivers? You've seen my driving. Right. Anybody, do you trust planes? They're safer than cars. There's a bit more space about them. Anybody not trust planes? Okay. Few? Okay. People trust trains? Some people really, really like trains. And what about boats or ships or ferries, those types of things? Yeah, okay. Anybody trust the chocolate I've just given you? Do you see? Some of you have already eaten it. That you just opened it up. You know, it might not have been, might it? You know those ones where they wrap up Brussels sprouts and pretend they're chocolates or something, or Ferrero Rocher? I could have done that, but we just went straight into believing. And most of the things I put on here, we're all happy to believe in and to trust in. So I wonder why we do trust some things and we don't trust others. The reality is we all trust in things that we don't understand or see, or that we can feel, or that we can touch, as an element that we are willing to trust some things, but we might be fearful or untrusting of other things. And I wonder why that is. I wonder what it is about us that means that we can trust some things and not other things. Why do billions of people believe and trust in God, yet so many others don't? Have you ever thought about that? What makes me believe when other people don't? And we've all heard about people who've got this unshakable faith. You've seen them go through the most horrendous of circumstances, and yet they can stand solid in their faith. I remember worshipping with at a previous church, and there was a family, and their son had really bad mental health, and he'd had a bit of an episode, and he ended up being sectioned and actually, cuffed to his bed. He wasn't able to move, and he was injected and with so many things that just kind of made him comatose. And we'd been involved in it for over the weekend, and then Sunday morning they were there worshiping and singing their hearts out of how much they love God. And I was just like, wow, have I got that kind of faith? Am I able that whatever comes at me, that I would be able to stand and worship God when my children are seriously ill? You've heard me say before about Desmond Tutu, no longer with us, but he has got the most amazing faith. The way in which he laughs, and the which whatever comes at him, all of the things that were going on in Africa and South Africa, he was content, he was happy, and he enabled people to just journey with him and see God through him. And I wondered, how does he maintain that level of happiness through all of what he goes through? And that's what impresses me, is we see people with that level of faith and wonder, how come they have got that when other people don't? It's not that they have amazing beliefs, because they're all believing in the same thing. The point at which we're going to today is they have amazing faith. Their faith is so strong, it's amazing. And they have big confidence in God. And as we go through this series, we want to explore about, where does that come from? Oh, wrong button. So in this series, we're going to there's going to be a focus on, if you've lost your faith, if you're beginning to lose your faith and you're not quite sure where God is in a particular circumstance. We see that a lot. I love God, but now this has happened. So how can there be a God if this was happened to me, or it's been allowed to happen to somebody else? Or maybe you're looking for faith and you're thinking, well, I want to give it a go. I've seen other people have confidence and just be contented with their lives, and they've seen you and your families and your friends, and they're going, I think I might just kind of explore what this looks like for me. Or maybe you've lost your faith and it's been a while since you've been in church. Then this is an opportunity to go through this series and have a look at it as well. Or if you're in that place where you go, I know I've got a faith, I know I believe, I trust God, but I want to go deeper, then my plan is that this series will do all of those things for us. So wherever you are on that scale, I believe that this is something in this series for you as we look through. And it's quite okay if you are anywhere on that scale. If you've lost your faith and you're here because maybe a family member has dragged you along, well, that's okay. Some of us all feel and have doubts at times and go through those things. So we're here to have a look at those things today. Because when we follow Jesus through the gospel, we find out a lot about faith. And the big thing that we find about him, what we're going to focus on today, is that he was amazed. Ever been amazed at anything? Been amazed when somebody else in your family takes that thing off the bottom step and takes it upstairs for you? That's amazing, isn't it, when people do that? All those types of things. But Jesus, we know there's two accounts when Jesus has been amazed in the gospel. The first time is when a centurion, so a Roman soldier, has approached him. So Roman soldiers, everybody would think he's not Jewish, he's not following any particular belief system. He is 100% focused on the Roman Empire and who's in control at that particular time. And he approaches Jesus and he says, my servant's not very well. Will you come along and heal him? He needs some healing from you. He recognized who Jesus was. There was something about him that had, the stories about him of healings and his preachings around the place, that he had seen something in him, recognized that there was something more to him. And he says, my servant is ill. Will you heal him? And Jesus says, yeah. Let's go right now. Let's go to your home and let's pray for him and see if we can get him healed. And the centurion goes, whoa, no, Jesus. You don't need to actually come to the house. I've seen how you work. I've seen that you belong to something far bigger than just yourselves. You're not acting in your own strength. So just say the words and it will be done. And I know who you are. And he continues with saying to Jesus, for I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. So I can tell this one, go and do that. And I can go and tell that one, come here, and he comes. And I can say to my servant, do this. And he does it. He's saying, I understand how authority works. I understand how all of these things, they obey me because of who I represent. I represent the Roman Empire, and so they are going to obey me and do what I want them to do. And I've seen that in you, Jesus. I've seen that the things of the world obey you. So if you're going to heal him, you don't need to come to my house. You just need to say the words, and I believe that he will be healed. Anybody got faith like that? That's amazing faith, isn't it? And that's exactly what Jesus said. Because when he heard it, he was amazed. He was amazed that this Roman centurion who had seen all of what Jesus had been doing, who represented the Roman Empire, had signed up for the military and was part of what they were doing, he could see that Jesus was something different. And he knew that one word from Jesus would make a difference on his servant back at home. Jesus was impressed and he was amazed and astonished. So what about this centurion had amazed Jesus? It was his faith. Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel. It's a little bit of a dig, isn't it, the Jewish people there? I've not found anyone here who have that kind of faith. That's kind of what he was saying, because people were listening to him and watching, and he's then digging at them by going, this guy has got far more faith than you lot. And that's what he was amazed at, because nobody had expected a Roman centurion to have that kind of faith. He's gone with his belief and his knowledge, and he's saying, yes, I have that kind of faith. And Jesus, has never been impressed with how much knowledge that anybody has. How much you can recite your Bible or you know exactly where things are. That does not impress Jesus. What impresses him, what makes him amazed, is this extraordinary faith. The second instance when we hear about Jesus being amazed is a slightly different one. He's teaching and he's healing people again, as such was his ministry, and he's walking around. And then some people are listening in, and he's in his hometown, and he's really sharing lots of things with the people who are listening there in the synagogue. And then a little bit of jealousy comes in. People are starting to think, hold on a minute, isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James and Joseph, Judas and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us in the room? Who knew Jesus had sisters? Anybody got sisters? Love having sisters? Hey, not my grandchildren. They don't like each other. So anyway, they're going, he's not special. And they were worried that Jesus, who had grown up among them, was there thinking that he was somehow better than them. And this jealousy creeps in. And his response was, he was amazed at their lack of faith of who he is. Had seen him grow up, and they hadn't allowed that God could use him to do amazing things. So there's two things that amazed Jesus. One was great faith, and the second one was his lack of faith. Jesus' mandate with us when he was here on earth was to leave us with this mandate, in spite of everything, whatever's going on in your life, amazing faith. But as often happens, is people get confused, don't they? And the message through the years from Adam and Eve, the story, the creation story that's shared with Noah and Abraham and all through the prophets and all through the kings, the message of God and who he is was getting confused and mixed up with various things. And the object of their faith had shadows around it, and people weren't totally sure. And they were thinking it was more about obedience to the rules rather than faith and loving who God is. Thing is, when you have faith, there's always an object of that faith. There's always this, it's not like hope or optimism of, I just want something great to happen and I'm going to believe things are going to be good, and if I think right, then great things are going to happen. That's not what faith is. Faith is being sure and certain of something that we can have faith in. So faith always has an object. When we were looking earlier about planes and cars and trains, there's a mode of transport that we might have faith in. So if you're about to get onto a plane, you're putting your faith into that plane, the aircraft, and the pilot to keep you in the air. You put your faith in me when you accepted the chocolates and ate them without questioning. All of those things, you put your faith into something. Object of faith isn't this outcome. It's not thinking it's all going to be okay. It's not some form of optimism. There is something that is there. And Jesus had come to become the object of our faith. And he invited people to believe in him and trust in him. And as he gathered these group of people around him as part of his ministry, towards the end of time, he says to them, "Do not let your hearts be troubled." Have I gone too far now? Oh. I'm not sure where I'm at with these now, so sorry about that. Okay. I went ahead of myself. Jesus says to them, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me." Let's just unpack that a little bit. If he's saying believe in God, but also believe in me, they may have been quite okay about believing in God, but believing in him who's there in front of them might have been a step too far for them. But what he's saying is you can trust in me in the ways in which you have trust with God. And he's establishing himself as this object of faith because Jesus came to show us who God is. They'd had this understanding that had got confused over time, and he had come so that they could be clear, that they had a focus and an object of their faith. He came to reveal who God is to us. He came to undo assumptions and to put in right ones. He was really clear in what he was saying, and for some people that would have been offensive. For some people, they wouldn't have wanted to listen to this young boy who they'd seen grown up as a carpenter. But he says, if you want to know who God is, and come and listen, come and follow me, and I will show you. When we read the Gospels, we need to be asking ourselves this question, what do I learn about God from Jesus? As I look at Jesus in the Gospels, what do I learn about God which is true? Time and time again, Jesus had to put people on the right path. Years of assumptions had led them astray, and they were believing and thinking all sorts of things to understand who God was, and they'd gone off the path. And he'd have these incidents with them. Do you ever have that with perhaps with your family or your friends or at work, where something's happened and there's been a misunderstanding and you need to set the path straight? You just need to get things clear and everybody back on the same page. And that's really what Jesus was doing. He'd come to put us all back on the same page. And there were several incidences where he had to do it. There's a time where we read about in John 9, where the disciples had seen this blind man, and they were really wanting to get to the deepness of their faith and understand who God is. And they were believing that, well, if you had something wrong with you, if you were sick, that somebody, either yourself or your family, had done some sin so bad, you had been made blind by God as a result of it. So they're wanting to understand who had sinned to make this man blind. And so they're having those questions with them. And Jesus says, that's not how it works. That's not what it's like. Yes, there are instances in the Old Testament where God is talking to people about illness and the things that they've done, but it's not who God is. If something bad happens to you, it's not because of God. Sometimes it can just be we make dumb, what's the word? My brain's gone. Decisions, that's the word, thank you. Dumb decisions on some of the things that we're doing in our lives. And another time, Jesus was teaching about loving your neighbor. And who is our neighbor? Jesus had to re-educate them on who their neighbor was. And he tells them this story about the Good Samaritan, and maybe some of you have heard that as well. And basically what he's saying is, a neighbor is now anyone who has a need that you can meet. And that's really important for us in my ministry here, is that we look at our community and what are their needs and we meet them. That's how we are good neighbors. And here we see Jesus re-educating them that a neighbor is anybody who has a need that you can meet. And he goes a bit deeper with them in Matthew 5. It records, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. This is going back to King David and some of the things that he was saying, and obviously some of the wars that he was waging. And yes, that might have been okay then, but that's not who God is. Jesus is teaching them, and they're having to unlearn stuff. Anybody had to unlearn things and then relearn things because the way that you'd made assumptions about things, and that wasn't what it was around. And Jesus continues and he says, but I tell you, love your enemies. This was groundbreaking, revolutionary. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And when you do these things, you may be children of your Father in heaven. This is what it means to be part of God's world. Is that even when we feel persecuted, even when we feel stressed, when we feel that everything is going on against us, is we remember who we are and we choose our responses accordingly. This is who God is. This is what he's like. That's what Jesus is trying to tell them through that story of the Good Samaritan. And it was a big shift. And he wanted to make sure that they understand and that God is to be the object of their faith, not their practices, their religious practices or the things that they were doing. It's not about obedience to the law. And the disciples are getting their heads around this concept that Jesus is sharing with them. And he goes one step further and he says, God causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good. So let's just think about that. What's he saying to people there? He's saying that, to grow your food, you need a bit of sun. And it's easier for living, isn't it? If the sun's shining and we have vitamin D needs from the sun. But when the sun is out shining, he doesn't just shine on Jewish people in this time, is he? The sun shines on everybody. It's not the sun, God doesn't just allow the sun to shine on certain different people. He's saying he lets the sun shine on everybody. And the same when it comes to rain. The rain goes on everybody's crops. It fills everybody's pools and demands for waters. That's who God is. That's how big his kingdom is. That's who we're to love. That's who our neighbor is. Or our neighbors are. God gives his grace to everyone. And again, that is radical. That is earth-shattering at this particular time. but God wants them and us to know the very true nature of who God is. And he's inviting them as well as you to trust in God as he actually is. So if you want to know who God is, I would advise you not to start in Genesis. Lots of people get a new Bible or they start exploring the Christian faith and they pick it up and they open it up on page 1, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and they get to about verse 2, verse 3, or chapter 2, chapter 3, and they're quite confused about what God is actually doing. I would say start in the Gospels. Start in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and find out who Jesus is. Because once you find out who Jesus is, you then will know who God is. Now, if you've been coming to this church for a while or you've been around Bible studies and preaching, that you'll understand that there's this really important guy called Paul. And he changed things. He'd been persecuting people who believed in Jesus, and he was right at the very heart of this transitioning when God met him. Jesus met him and showed him who he was, and then he wanted everybody else to understand that the object of their faith should be Jesus. So he was in a great position of understanding how the Jewish faith, how pagan faiths all came together and understood what they focus on. And he summarized it in a letter that he wrote to people, and we have it in the New Testament, which I don't have. Oh, I do. He says, these are a shadow of the things that yet to come, the things that they've understood about faith, the things that they've understood about God right up until the first century was just a shadow. It wasn't the real thing. They'd been seeing the bits that were around it, the shadow that it had cast. And I wonder what you'd have learned from shadows, because you can't learn everything about the object from just the shadow that there is. I wonder if you've seen this photo before. Can you see what it is? What these are pictures of? Camels. Yeah? So the camel shape that you see there is not the camel. It's the shadow of the camel. The actual camel itself is just it's slightly lighter. It's just a line, but the way the sun has fallen is the camel. So if we just studied camels by looking at the shadows, we wouldn't fully understand who they are. We might think that they were black. We might think that they were flat and not three-dimensional. We might not fully understand how they went together. And this is the kind of thing that Paul is trying to say, and what Jesus was saying before him is that don't just look at the shadow. Look at the object itself to fully understand who God is. That's the way to see it, because shadows aren't the real thing. They're not complete. And he's saying the way that you find that with God is that the reality, the real thing, the real deal is in Jesus. And he's saying that the apostles and the disciples had grown up in the shadow, in the reflection. And Paul is saying, yes, I've been there. I've done the same. But if you want to understand who God is, you need to look at Jesus. He is the real deal. You need to unlearn all the assumptions that you've made by being in the shadows and focus on the real thing. Jesus is the perfect representation of his Father, of our Heavenly Father, of God. Everything before was pointing to this moment when Jesus was there. Never before had they had that full picture. Now he's saying, study Jesus, have a relationship with Jesus, and then you get to know what faith and trust is all about. Because when we look at any relationship, it's all based on trust. Anybody have a deep relationship with another human being, whether it's a family member, a spouse, a good friend? Trust is at the very center of it for that relationship to be good. It's not obedience, it's not fear. And that's what Jesus is offering, is saying, come and have a relationship with me. Put your trust in me. And it's interesting, isn't it, that Jesus come to engage again in relationship, engage again in trust, because that was what got broken in Genesis, where we read about with Adam and Eve, is that the trust in God got broken and people wanted to do things their own way. Jesus came so that he could be the object of their faith. So we might say that God so loved the world that he wanted a relationship with his people, so much so that he reveals himself through Jesus. You can't have a relationship with a shadow. And maybe if you've had faith and you're losing it, maybe you've been in those shadows and not focusing on who Jesus is. And Jesus invites us to trust him. And by trusting him, that we may come to know who God is and trust him. We discover in the Gospels what it's like, who Jesus is, and how we can develop this unshakable faith in God. Because for those of us who have a strong faith, God is honored by our living, active, death-defying, in spite of everything else, faith. He's not honored that we can only follow him and like him when everything's going well. He wants to know that we're going to trust him when life isn't going to our plans, and when we have to face the consequences of some of our bad choices and our bad decisions. That's what it's all about. God wants to know, are you going to trust me through everything? Well, I've told bits of my story before when I felt God call me into ministry, and managed to go about 4 or 5 years ignoring it and not paying attention to it. And one time I had quite a deep experience with God, and he was asking me lots of questions about why I had not answered his call, why I had not done what he had asked me to do. And I was giving all my reasons. Everybody been in that situation, maybe when you were teenagers, or maybe it was just me who wasn't a good teenager. But you know, when you've got every excuse under the sun for all of your bad decisions. Some of you, you've had to do that this weekend with your spouse, I can see. But anyway, I remember giving God all of my excuses, going, well, I couldn't do that because of this, and I couldn't, there was that reason, and God, you know me, how can I do this? All of those types of things were going on in this conversation. And then his final question to me was, do you not trust me? And that really got me, because previously I'd said, my daughter's in a vulnerable state at the moment, she just had twins, all the rest of it. And he just said, do you not trust me? And I didn't have an excuse for that, because I knew deep down I did. And I wanted to trust him more. And that was the decision made for me. So the question is, do you trust God? That's what it's coming down to. And you may not have enough knowledge or enough experience to trust God, and that's fine. And that's some of the things that we want to carry through over the next couple of weeks about how you can go through that. Because what we want to do is to be able to leave you in a point where you would be able to answer any challenge, any question with you. What would I do if I was confident that God was with me? If God was with you and God was for you and you could trust him, what are the things that you would do? What would make you step out in faith? What would make you want to get involved with a team and serve here? What would make you do something at work? What would help you in your relationships at home? If you knew 100% that God was with you. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about our faith. We all want that kind of faith, and it's the kind of faith that I want for all of us as we go through this series. How we get it is what this series is about. When we understand who Jesus is, then we can understand that he is about this perfect relationship with God and with us. And when we can get that, we can create and have this enduring faith that is going to help lead us through the complicated aspect of life. So over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about what God uses in each of us to grow and deepen and mature our faith. And I'm convinced that there are 5 things that are able us to grow a particular faith, and we're going to go over those over the next 5 weeks. And our desire is that people learn how to have an enduring faith of your very own. You're not in the shadows of a partner, a friend, somebody else that you're close with, or anybody else here, that you have that faith for yourself, that you know who the real object is, and you're not staying in the shadows. So that's what we're going to be doing. We want an active faith, that whatever we're going on in our lives, we know how to do that. Whether you are the first time that you're experiencing an empty house, your children all grown up and they've moved away, and you're thinking, well, what do we do now? Maybe you're recovering from a broken relationship, a broken marriage, and you're thinking, well, what does my faith look like now? Maybe work is a problem for you, and you're thinking, well, how does my faith get me through this? Maybe finances, and you're worried about, as the winter is coming up, how that's going to work out for you. Then we want you to be able to answer those questions, being rooted and grounded in your faith. So hopefully this experience will help you with some of those things. So I hope you're going to join with us. If you can't be with us, then do catch up online, because we think these are really grounded and really important things for us as a church as we go forward. So shall we pray, and then we will sing again as we prepare our hearts for communion. Holy Father, thank you for being there always through time. And we can see that through the stories of the Bible, how people kind of went astray and they had misunderstandings and they'd learned the wrong things about you. And Lord, we understand that we too stand in that place of understanding wrong things about you. So Lord, will you come with a fresh wave of your Spirit to help us, to cleanse us, to get right with you. And for those looking for faith, Lord, may you just reach out to them. Don't let them be kind of bombarded and carry around the baggage of the wrong things that maybe some of us who've been involved with church life for years have picked up and carry around with us. Lord, help us to focus totally on you, that our faith is in you and you alone. Lord, thank you that you make it clear what makes you amazed at us, the faith that we have, that your grace is for everyone, and you love each and every one of us equally. Thank you, Lord. Amen.